Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Racing Show here at RacePlazaMedia. My name is Pia, and today is the last day of the World Rally Championship, the Acropolis Rally in Greece. So just in time for that, I wanted to bring out a video about the only woman who has ever won the Acropolis Rally, Michele Mouton. Not only is she the only woman who's ever won that rally, she's the only woman who's ever won a WRC race and almost won the driver championship as well. So I don't know a lot about her. I didn't know a lot about her going into this week. I've heard her name many times, and I mean, she's very famous and she's the woman of rally. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about her. And for that, I watched the documentary Queen of Speed. I'll put the link in the description here in this YouTube video because you can find it on YouTube at this very moment. So hopefully you'll be able to check it out or want to check it out after this video. The documentary is just an hour and a half, so not too long. It really encompasses her whole career in rally. So it's really, really interesting. But to get you started, here are some of the most important points that I took away by watching the Queen of Speed documentary. So let's start at the beginning. Michele Mouton was born in the south of France. She was always considered the daredevil of the family. She started driving cars at the age of 14, and skiing was really her outlet for speed. She always had this sense, this need for speed. So skiing was a thing that she did. She also loved driving cars because it gave her a certain essence of freedom, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate. But it wasn't until the 70s where she got into the car officially for the first time. So basically, she didn't get into rallying until the age of 22, which is quite late, especially considering nowadays most motorsport greats started racing in their early single-digit ages. So she didn't start until 22. A friend of hers was entering his car into a rally event in Monte Carlo, and he asked, "Oh, do you want to be my co-driver?" And she was like, "Well, why not? It's a new experience." And she likes speed, and it was in Monte Carlo, so why the hell not? So she joined him, and that kind of lit the fire under her. She competed under a couple more races alongside him as a co-driver, and then her father and her mother always came along with her. All her rally events, they were always there as long as they were healthy and fit to do so. And so the father, he inspected the car a little bit, and he was like, "Oh, this is not the car he wants his daughter racing." And so he made her a deal. He was like, "I'll buy you your first race car. I will support you, sponsor you for a year so you can really give it your all and see how you feel about it." And of course, she took the deal. So she drove in an Alpine. She competed in a lot of women-only rally events and a lot of French or European rally events. And she did that quite successfully from the get-go. Of course, there was a learning curve. She had to adapt to the different types of ground that you would race on. I mean, if you're a rally fan, you already know this. In rally, you don't just race against other people. You race against time, you race against the elements, and you race against yourself. Rally is insane. I mean, I personally really enjoy watching it. And I can only imagine back in those days, in the 70s and 80s, it was even crazier. Some people consider that the Group B of WRC the golden era of rally racing because those were beasts. Those vehicles and the drivers were absolutely bonkers. There were a lot less safety regulations in terms of the car as well as crowd control. The cars had an insane amount of power, an insane amount of braking power as well. There were a lot of major accidents during that time, several fatal accidents as well, unfortunately. So eventually those cars were banned. But Michele Mouton was competing in those crazy rallies in those crazy cars and conditions. In the documentary, they also pointed out that, of course, the spectators are a big thing in rally. I mean, I hope one day I get to be there for a rally and be there in the audience because you're right there on the road. It's open to the public. It's free because it goes through the country. Nowadays there's more regulations to it, but back then people were standing on the roads as the cars were coming in. They were just jumping out of the way. Sometimes they were even trying to touch the car just to kind of feel the connection to it. And by the end of the stages, mechanics were able to find fingers inside the car because people were touching, holding on to the car, and fingers were literally torn off. I mean, that's a bonkers. Crazy, crazy, crazy. But going back to Michele Mouton, so she made her official WRC debut in 1974, and throughout her career, throughout the years, she drove for different manufacturers. As mentioned, she started with Alpine, with the car that her dad purchased her. Before that, as a co-driver, she drove a Peugeot. Then throughout the years, she also drove a Fiat, which was a car that she said was very, very hard to drive. The engine was in the front. It was very heavy. She had blisters on her hands, but she also said that car really taught her a lot about speed and just the physicality of racing. So in her debut race in 1974, she ended up coming in 12th overall, which is amazing. It's an incredible feat as your first race, and also, of course, as a first woman driver. And of course, she got a lot of smack because of it. I mean, many of the men accused her, especially the ones that she had surpassed in her result, accused her of like an illegal engine. So the FIA literally almost tore the car apart to check to see if anything and everything was up to code and appropriate. She wasn't concerned because she knew her dad and her mechanic do things to the T, but they did what they had to do, and of course verified that she was driving in a up to code vehicle. So then in 1981, she was promoted or given the opportunity to drive in the brand new Audi Quattro, or Audi Quattro, how I would say it. It was a brand new, Audi was brand new on the scene for the WRC. It didn't have necessarily the image of a rally car, of a racing, of a street car. So Audi was joining WRC to also change their image, because if a car won on the Sunday, people bought it on the Monday. That was kind of the theory behind it, because even nowadays, rally cars are made in a way that people should be able to buy them as is. So it's a way to promote the cars. So then Audi came onto the scene. They had two cars. One of them was driven by the famous WRC driver Hannu Mikkola, and then the second car with second driver number 2, was Michele Mouton, and then she had a female co-driver, Fabrizia Pons. And Fabrizia Pons is also a woman on a whole other level. She's a co-driver. She was a driver also for a while, then she became a co-driver, and she was a very good co-driver. I mean, if you watch rally, you know that co-drivers cannot win you the race, but they can certainly lose you the race. And a good co-driver, it's all about language. It's all about figuring out when is the right time to share the information for the upcoming meters of the track with the driver, because sometimes they're in a mode that they can't receive that information. So it's very much, you have to find that right moment. You have to be in sync with each other. And Michele Mouton and Fabrizia Pons were a very, very good team. And also I want to point out, Fabrizia nowadays, she's 69, she is still competing as a co-driver. In fact, she was competing this WRC at this Acropolis rally. She was on the track. I mean, she's a legend, and she's still competing to this day, which I absolutely love. And in the documentary, you can see her home where she has all of the trophies, and she has cabinets full of them, but she doesn't have enough cabinets. There's a room there where they're all on the floor, because she has so many accomplishments as a driver as well as a co-driver. So big shout out to Fabrizia Pons. So those two women are now driving in the Audi Quattro, and it was a little tough at first. It was definitely a steep learning curve. There was lots of mechanical issues at first as well. However, they did do the learning. They put in the hard work. Fabrizia also said that Michele was very demanding of her as a co-driver, of the rest of the team, but also of herself. So there was a lot of work that they put in, but the work paid off. Her hard work also showed in terms of she changed her lifestyle. In the first couple of years of her rally experience, she always enjoyed smoking and dancing and drinking and just enjoying life while also racing. But as her numbers improved, as she was improving, she realized that she has to make a change to really compete at the top. So she stopped drinking, besides champagne, the winning champagne, she said, and she just focused on rally driving. And then in 1981, at the Sanremo Rally, things started to change. The first couple of stages at the Sanremo Rally are asphalt, which wasn't really in the wheelhouse of Michele as well as the Audi itself. However, once they switched to gravel, the tides turned. She ended up taking the lead and winning the Sanremo Rally in 1981. And that was only the beginning for her. Then, of course, 1982, the second season comes around. There was contract renewals, and in Audi, of course, they wanted to give her the same contract as before. And she was like, no, you know what? I'll make it easy for you. Let's just double it and we're good to go. I think it's wild that the lawyers were just like, yeah, we'll just give you the same contract, although she clearly has proven herself, and she even gave them their first win. Then in 1982, Michele won an additional 3 rallies. She won in Portugal, she won the Acropolis Rally, as well as she won in Brazil. I mean, the season itself had some ups and downs. The first race of the season, she had a big crash in Monaco. However, then she recovered. She had those 3 wins, and she was competing for the driver championship. So going into the second to last round at the Ivory Coast, it was really between her and Noel, who was currently the number 1 for the driver championship. And the people were saying that if she would win this Ivory Coast rally, she would be able to win the overall driver championship because it was so close. And unfortunately, the Ivory Coast rally was just not meant to be. The morning of the first stage, she got a call right before the rally started, about an hour and a half before she was supposed to go on. She found out that her father unfortunately had passed away. He was battling cancer. He just recently started chemo. However, over the last couple of days, his health was deteriorating and he passed away that morning. Michele immediately said she just wants to go home. She wants to be there for her mom. Her team didn't know about it because she didn't want anybody to know. So the only person who knew were her partner at the time, her co-driver Fabrizia. And Fabrizia said she was down to do anything Michele wanted. If she wanted to go home, they could go home. For her, it didn't really matter. But Michele decided, after also talking to her mother over the phone, that she would continue racing and competing for her father because that's what her father wanted. So she started the rally and she did quite well. So that several stages into the rally, she had driven out over an hour of a lead to Wolfgang Röhrle. So it was so close. And then she ended up getting a gearbox issue, which usually it doesn't take that long to switch to gearbox, especially with her experienced mechanics. However, something went wrong, so it ended up taking 40 minutes. Then she tried to get into the car and there was a clutch issue. So the time that she had driven out, over an hour that she had driven out, was dwindling and dwindling away. So by the time she got back on, she was competing. She was trying to really push it because she wanted that win, not just for herself, but for her father. She was speeding this long straight where there was a sharp left turn coming right after, and she just overdid it. She went into too much speed into that corner and she crashed. So unfortunately, that year, 1982, that's when she was this close to winning the driver championship. And Wolfgang Röhrle even said, like, it didn't really matter for him to win that second one because he will be forgotten eventually. But Michele Mouton will not be forgotten because she is an icon. And unfortunately, he was also one of the many other drivers at the time that were talking poorly about women in racing, and also speaking along the lines of, oh, if a woman ever beats me, I will never drive again. Of course, I mean, it's unfortunate that it happened then, and it is unfortunately still happening now, that some men think that they can drive better than a woman who's been competing and training in driving for a very, very long time. I think, and Michele says the same thing, and I've heard this many times before, that motorsports, horseback riding, and sailing are 3 of the very few sports that men and women can compete in equally. I know it's going to go crazy in the comments because I just said that, but I stand by it. Michele Mouton went on to compete for a couple more years. She ended up retiring in 1985, but not before she did another huge feat as not only a European driver, but also as a woman driver. She went to the US. There was this big thing that Audi wanted to do. They wanted to promote the cars in America as well. So they sent her to compete at Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak is a very famous race in Colorado here in the US, and she broke records. She was the fastest up there. She was the first woman, of course, up there. She did also incur a time penalty prior to the actual race. Then she also, because of some regulations and some concerns, they ended up having to push her to the starting line. So she almost did a standing start where all other competitors did a rolling start in this competition. And I mean, the Pike Peaks race is bonkers. The curves that you go up, the heights that you go up, of course it's indicative in the name, but also there's no boundaries, and the speeds that she went. And she was also talking about that she was really, really pushing it. She was pushing the car. There were corners towards the top. There are I think it's 4 famous corners up there where she was like, usually in the first one you lift a little bit, but she was like, no, I'm just going to go full out. And she did it. And she thought she would almost go over, but it worked out. So then the next corner, she just pushed the brake a little bit later just to give her a little bit more. And I believe she ended up winning by 30 seconds. And because she's one of the winners of Pikes Peak, her name is still written on the plaque on the top of that mountain. Nowadays, Michele is not only retired from racing, but for a long time, she also worked for the FIA. She was the first president of the FIA's Women's and Motorsport Commission. In 2011, she was also the FIA World Rally Championship manager, and she was also at some point the FIA safety delegate. But nowadays, she is fully retired and enjoying life with her family and her grandkids. And it was also really interesting to see that all her trophies, all her medals, everything she's earned throughout her career are in boxes in a shed in her backyard, because she said she doesn't have to put it on display. All she needs are her own memories. And I think that's beautiful. All right, folks, that's all I have to share with you today about Michele Mouton. I mean, what a legend she is. What an icon for women in motorsport, specifically rally. And I know that there's a lot of women working in rally, trying to work their way up. And I hope sooner than later, we will have another woman competing at the levels as Michele did in the WRC. So let me know in the comments below if you've heard of Michele Mouton before, if you know of another famous female rally driver that you want to give a shout out in the comments, please do so. And with that, I will leave you guys for today. Please remember to give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you guys again here at the Daily Racing Show with some weekend recaps of MotoGP. So definitely tune in for that for tomorrow. And until then, have a great day. Bye-bye.